Hello friends, my name is Michelle Fondin and I'm the author of the new book, Enlightened Medicine, Your Power to Get Well Now, an integrative approach to healing the 7 deadly lifestyle diseases. And today I'm going to read to you the preface of the book. This is a little tradition. I've done this since book 1, and I love just to give you a little sneak preview of the book to intrigue you to read the book. So sit back, relax, grab a cup of coffee or tea, and have a listen. Preface. My mother's beliefs and my experience with Western medicine. The psychology of illness is a funny thing. Our beliefs form who we are and how we react to sickness. I remember being sick often as a child, but I don't know if I was actually sick a lot or if I'm recalling my mother's stories of how I was always sick. The undeniable fact was that in my family, I was always the one with the flu, cold, strep throat, or gastrointestinal virus. At the first cough or stomach pain, my mother would whisk me off to the doctor's office. So all the way through age 18, I remember sitting for hours in the waiting room at the doctor's office. My childhood doctor's office catered to low-income families and served more as a walk-in clinic than a traditional office. More often than not, we would wait for 3 to 4 hours to be seen by the doctor. Everyone would be sitting shoulder to shoulder, kids crawling on the floor and playing in groups, sick people all stuffed into a narrow room, coughing, sneezing, and waiting to somehow get better. My mom trusted the doctor like a god. She wanted the antibiotics, the cough syrup, the cold remedy, the throat spray, or anything else to make her daughter better. So I was poked, prodded, medicated, bedridden, and stuffed into a crowded waiting room time and again for years. And yet going to the doctor's office never seemed to help. My immune system was constantly compromised. I would miss days and weeks of school. Never did I hear my mother say, "Trust your body, it knows how to get well." Instead, all I heard was worry in her voice when she told me, "You must finish your medicine." "Michelle," she would say, "you are always the one who gets sick." To say the least, I was not very empowered in my health. To make matters worse, I was extremely sensitive to medications and allergic to several antibiotics. I had an intense gag reflex that to this day makes it difficult for me to take pills. It felt like my body had an innate intelligence to reject the strong medications that my mother and the doctors were stuffing down my throat. Somehow my body knew that there must be a better way. Even though my body wanted to heal naturally, my mind seemed to have other plans. When I say illness is a funny thing, I mean the dynamics of illness are strange. Experiencing ill health is a negative thing, but sometimes people use it consciously or unconsciously for positive rewards. As a small child, I felt I unconsciously used illness to get more attention in a dysfunctional family household. My parents divorced when I was 5 years old. It was a traumatic experience for me. The divorce immediately plunged my family into poverty because my mom had to go back to school and work as a waitress. My sister was nearly 2 at the time. Even though my mom wanted the divorce, she was sad and bitter about my dad's lack of commitment and how the relationship ended. She held on to that sadness and bitterness for a long time. As a result, I had to grow up a lot faster than most kids my age. At age 5, I had to console my mom and help raise my little sister. After the divorce, I didn't get a lot of attention. In retrospect, I think on a subconscious level, I chose to get sick often because it made my mom pay attention to me. She was always the one who took me to the doctor's office. She was the one who cooked me chicken noodle soup and served it to me in bed. And she was the one who cared for me, but only when I was sick. On the flip side, I hated being sick. I loved everything about school and longed to be there. I hated those awful doctor's offices, the long waits, the smelly rooms, and the medications that felt like poisons to my body. I loathed not feeling normal since most kids were much healthier than I was. I felt embarrassed when I got stacks of homework and get well cards from my classmates like an invalid. But somehow the reward of my mother's attention outweighed the pain of being constantly sick. And what's even more ironic is that it's only through my experience with illness that I can write about wellness. Throughout my childhood, my mother taught me to completely mistrust my body, By the time I was 18, I learned to hate doctor's offices so much that I never wanted to step foot into one ever again. To me, it equaled pain, lots of pain. I was never taught preventive medicine. My mom, terrified of the world out there and determined that germs would somehow always get me, never taught me how to build up my immune system so that I would be strong and healthy. When I was 18, a man came into my life and changed my perspective. Chris was vegetarian, drank lots of water, and practiced yoga. I was completely enamored with him, and my affection for him made me want to adopt his lifestyle. He taught me to respect and love my body. In 1988, he took me to food co-ops to search out organic food. He introduced me to a vegetarian diet and taught me mindfulness. For the first time in my life, I learned that I could do something to help my weak immune system. Thanks to this epiphany, I made some major changes. For one, I stopped eating red meat completely and opted for some occasional chicken or fish. Secondly, I began to drink water. What a concept, right? Up until then, no one had ever encouraged me to drink water. Throughout my childhood, I remember being crippled by severe stomach cramps from constipation and headaches. Once I started drinking water, all of those symptoms stopped. I'd been severely dehydrated and had no idea. I also started running, doing yoga, and aerobics. The other thing that motivated me was an enormous fear of my family's genes. My maternal grandmother suffered from deep depression. My uncle was manic depressive. My father suffered his first heart attack at age 49. To make a long family medical history short, I did not want to turn out like any of my relatives. But my relationship with Chris came early enough in life that it turned my belief about health completely upside down, and for the better. Still, sometimes I saw Chris taking his healthy living to extremes. In the few years we were together, I saw him go from a vegetarian diet to a vegan diet, and for months at a time, even a macrobiotic diet. He was already fairly thin, but when I saw him eating only brown rice for weeks at a time and losing even more weight, I thought surely there must be a happy medium to getting healthy. Then about 8 years later, I was hit with thyroid cancer. I'd gotten lazy about my strict and healthy diet. I wasn't exercising regularly, and I had forgotten yoga altogether. Furthermore, I was the mother of 2 small children, and I was unhappy with my marriage. As I wrote in my first book, The Wheel of Healing with Ayurveda, an easy guide to a healthy lifestyle, I was able to get rid of the cancer with Western medicine, but was able to truly heal with Ayurvedic medicine. After my cancer diagnosis, everything I learned from my relationship with Chris came back to me. It was a major wake-up call, and I knew it was time to take complete responsibility for my health and well-being. And if I didn't, I knew I might suffer from other devastating illnesses in the future. The biggest source of frustration with the medical community at the time of my diagnosis and treatment was the mechanical way in which I was processed. From the OBGYN who diagnosed a potential problem, to the endocrinologist who did my fine needle biopsy, and then onto more doctors, nurses, and pathologists, I felt less like a human being with concerns and fears and more like a product on a conveyor belt. I do, however, remember one tender moment, a German surgeon who, seeing how nervous I was, lovingly tickled my toes before I went under. I'll never forget that gesture of affection. It was his way of saying, "Trust me, you're going to be okay in my care." And I did trust him because he made me feel human. Until I found integrative medical expert Dr. Leonard Wisniewski, I didn't feel that a single doctor actually listened to me. It wasn't that I was a bad patient either. I wasn't loud, boisterous, or overly chatty. After all, I grew up in doctors' offices with a mother who took doctor's word at gospel. As a result, I was obedient most of the time. But contracting cancer at age 28 leaves some questions. The cancer, compounded with the array of negative symptoms I experienced once I had my thyroid removed, left me really suffering. And every single doctor dismissed my symptoms and discomfort because my blood tests showed my thyroid levels were fine. Maybe you have a story like mine. Perhaps you've been diagnosed with a disease like cancer, hypertension, heart disease, hypothyroidism, diabetes, or an autoimmune disease. Since you're reading this book, maybe you haven't had the answers you seek on getting well. It's possible that you're just as frustrated as I was, not only from needing answers, but also from lack of compassionate care by your healthcare provider. The good news is physicians can learn better bedside manner with better awareness and practice. The more physicians are able to practice medicine in a way that aligns with their moral values, the more they can take the time to show attention and love to each patient. It's my belief that Western medicine must arrive at this point. The medical system must create trusting relationships between patients and providers and not treat them just like any other name on a sheet. We must turn the medical system upside down. The bigger picture is that Western medicine is extremely limited in the solutions it can bring to solve your illness. The doctors treating my illness were not bad people. They simply had their hands tied. They were doing what they were trained to do. They took my thyroid levels. Those levels were fine according to the blood tests. So in conclusion, I was supposedly fine and healthy. Unfortunately, within the model of Western medicine, there was nothing more they could do for me. In fact, one endocrinologist even sent me to a psychiatrist because he said all of the symptoms were in my head. And since doctors prescribe medications, the psychiatrist prescribed an anti-anxiety medication. This, by the way, was not the solution to the problem I was experiencing. Imagine if you gave a few construction workers one hammer each, no other tools, and a whole pile of wood and instruct them to build a house. If they are versed in the art of construction, they could probably figure out a way to build a house. They might find things in nature to create nails and identify a way to cut the wood. They could build a house, probably not a very elaborate one, but it's possible. But those construction workers could build a much better house if they had an entire toolbox on hand. And if they each had electric saws, drills, and machines to hoist up beams, they could build an even more solid one. It took a doctor versed in integrative medicine to diagnose, treat, and help me solve the problem. Why did this work? The answer is simple. He had more tools at his disposal. The first tool he had was love over fear. He loved his patients enough to listen to them. He loved me enough to find solutions that were unconventional according to Western medicine, and was determined to go against conventional practice if it meant getting me healthy. He believed in giving his patients bear hugs like a loving parent for those who needed consoling upon hearing an upsetting diagnosis. He had knowledge in herbal medicine, vitamins, and minerals. He taught me not to let my family medical history cloud my perception of my own health. He sent me to his nurse practitioner to do guided meditation. He even had in-house massage therapists. Doctors in the Western model are much like the construction workers with one hammer. They can help you get healthy, but your health is not going to look as stellar as it would if they had other tools to help you build a mansion of health. And I don't know about you, but I'd rather have the mansion than the makeshift house built with only hammers. Thank you so much for listening to the preface of Enlightened Medicine, Your Power to Get Well Now. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for joining me. Please subscribe to my channel below. Share this video with friends, family, and your dog. Please support me on Patreon, www.patreon.com/Michelle S. Fondin, and I will see you in the next video.